Elena Martinez sat in the back corner of Professor Vash's advanced xenobiology class, her notebook filled with neat, careful diagrams of alien cellular structures. While her classmates debated loudly about the theoretical applications of Zephyrian biotechnology, she remained silent, occasionally glancing up with dark eyes that seemed to hold depths no 22-year-old should possess. The Galactic University of New Geneva attracted students from across known space. Humans mingled with tall, graceful Altarians, whose skin shimmered like oil on water. The insectoid cricks clicked and chirped in their complex language while reviewing holographic textbooks. Even a few of the massive, rock-like Threnodi had enrolled, their heavy footsteps shaking the floor as they moved between classes. Elena fit in by not fitting in. While other human students formed groups, attended parties, and complained about coursework, she studied alone. Her professors knew her as competent but unremarkable. Her grades were good, not exceptional. She completed assignments on time, answered questions when called upon, and never caused trouble. The key difference between human and Crick's neural networks, Professor Vash was explaining, his forearms gesticulating as he spoke, lies in the distributed processing centers. Where humans centralize consciousness in a single brain, the Cricks operate with 7 independent neural clusters. A hand shot up from the middle of the classroom. But, Professor, wouldn't that make them vulnerable to targeted neurological attacks? Elena's pen stopped moving. She looked up sharply at the student who had asked the question, Marcus Chen, a military science major who often steered conversations toward combat applications. An interesting question, Mr. Chen, Professor Vash replied, his compound eyes reflecting the classroom's artificial lighting. Though I hardly see the relevance to our study of comparative anatomy. It's just that during the Hegemony War, Marcus continued, there were rumors about weapons specifically designed to exploit alien neural architectures. Theoretical stuff, mostly. The classroom grew quiet. The Hegemony War had ended only 5 years ago, leaving scars across dozens of worlds. Most species preferred not to discuss it in detail, especially the darker aspects of that conflict. Elena's grip tightened on her pen. She stared down at her notes, but her handwriting had become shaky. Professor Vash cleared his throat with a sound like grinding gravel. The Hegemony War employed many technologies that civilized beings prefer to forget. Perhaps we should return to our examination of respiratory systems. After class, Elena packed her materials quickly, hoping to leave before the usual post-lecture discussions began. But Marcus Chen appeared beside her desk, his expression curious. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said, studying her face. The war stuff bother you? I just don't think it's appropriate classroom material, Elena replied softly, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Fair enough, but I noticed you took a lot of notes during that part of the discussion. Military applications interest you? Elena met his gaze for a moment, and Marcus later told friends that looking into her eyes felt like staring into a deep, dark lake. I prefer to focus on healing rather than hurting. She walked away before he could respond, leaving Marcus with the uncomfortable feeling that he had just spoken to someone far more dangerous than she appeared. Elena's apartment was small and sparse. A few books on xenobiology sat neatly arranged on a shelf. Her kitchen contained basic supplies for simple meals. The only decoration was a single photograph on her nightstand, a picture of a young woman in military dress uniform, standing beside an older man who shared Elena's dark eyes and serious expression. That evening, Elena sat at her small desk, supposedly reviewing lecture notes, but instead of studying cellular structures, she found herself sketching from memory, detailed technical diagrams of neural disruptor frequencies, tactical maps of Crick's hive cities, and the intricate internal mechanisms of weapons that officially didn't exist. Her hands moved automatically, muscle memory guiding the pencil across the paper. These weren't the hands of a student who had never seen combat. The small scars across her knuckles, the way her fingers naturally fell into positions optimized for equipment handling, the unconscious efficiency of her movements, all spoke of extensive military training. A soft chime from her communication device interrupted her work. A message appeared on the small screen. Academic review meeting tomorrow at 1400 hours. Mandatory attendance. Dean Corin. Elena stared at the message for a long moment. Academic reviews were standard procedure, but something about the formal language and specific time notation felt wrong. In 5 years of civilian life, she had learned to distinguish between genuine academic business and something more serious. She deleted the message and walked to her bedroom window. 3 stories below, the university campus spread out in the evening light. Students moved along walkways, heading to dining halls or evening studies. Everything appeared normal, but Elena had learned during the war to notice things others missed. The way that Altarian student near the library kept checking his timepiece while pretending to read. The small vehicle parked across from her building that had been there for 2 days, despite the area's regular parking enforcement. The fact that her usual route to classes had been blocked 3 times this week for maintenance that never seemed to actually occur. Someone was watching her. Elena returned to her desk and carefully gathered the sketches she had been making. In the kitchen, she fed them one by one into the small recycling unit, watching as they dissolved into component atoms. Then she sat in her living room, appearing to study while actually listening to every sound from the hallway outside her door. At 23:47 hours, a timestamp that appeared automatically in her mind despite years of trying to suppress such military habits, she heard footsteps approaching her door. 2 sets, moving with the careful precision of trained individuals trying to appear casual. Elena closed her textbook and walked to the kitchen, where she filled a glass with water. To any observer, she appeared completely relaxed, but her free hand rested near the knife block, and her body was positioned to move quickly toward either the door or the fire escape. The footsteps paused outside her apartment. Elena heard the faint electronic whine of a scanning device. Someone was checking for life signs, electronic devices, or weapon signatures. After 30 seconds, the footsteps moved on. Elena remained in the kitchen for 10 more minutes, sipping water and appearing to review notes on her handheld device. But she was actually accessing encrypted files buried deep in the university's network, files that officially didn't exist, detailing the current locations of every surviving veteran from her former unit. What she found made her blood run cold. Of the 37 members of Tactical Unit 7 who had survived the war, 12 had died in the past 6 months. The official records listed various causes: transport accidents, medical conditions, random criminal activity. But Elena recognized the pattern. Someone was systematically eliminating the soldiers who had participated in the Hegemony War's final operations. The operations that had ended the war in a single devastating week. Elena closed the files and deleted her access logs. Then she walked to her bedroom and for the first time in 5 years opened the sealed container hidden beneath her bed. Inside lay items that belonged to a different person, someone she had tried very hard to forget. A small data crystal containing classified military files. A ceremonial dagger with the emblem of the Terran Marine Corps. And a medal she had never worn in public, stamped with words that few beings in the galaxy understood. For services rendered in the elimination of the Crix Prime Collective. Elena held the medal in her palm, feeling its familiar weight. The quiet student that her professors and classmates knew was a carefully constructed identity. But underneath that facade lay Captain Elena Martinez of the Terran Marine Corps, recipient of the Solar Cross for extraordinary valor, and the soldier who had personally delivered the weapon that ended the Hegemony War. A weapon that had eliminated not just the Crix military forces, but every member of their leadership caste across 17 worlds simultaneously. Elena had hoped that identity was buried forever. But if someone was hunting down her former comrades, it meant that the war wasn't really over. It meant that somewhere in the galaxy, beings existed who wanted revenge for what she had done, and they had found her. Elena packed the medal away and sealed the container. Tomorrow she would attend her classes as usual. She would sit quietly in the back of Professor Vash's classroom and take careful notes on alien biology. She would maintain the fiction that she was nothing more than a dedicated student with no interest in military matters. But tonight, for the first time in 5 years, Captain Elena Martinez began planning for war. She retrieved a standard university datapad and began composing what appeared to be a research paper on comparative neurology. But embedded within the text, using an encryption method known only to members of her former unit, was a different message entirely. Torch 1 to all torch elements. Pattern recognition indicates hostile contact imminent. Recommend immediate dispersal to secondary positions. War protocols may be necessary. Acknowledge when secure. As she worked, Elena's movements took on a different quality. The careful student posture was replaced by the efficient motions of a combat veteran. Her eyes regularly scanned the windows and door, automatically calculating angles and threat vectors. Her breathing settled into the controlled rhythm that had once helped her remain steady while targeting enemy positions from impossible distances. The quiet student was disappearing bit by bit as the warrior underneath began to emerge. Elena finished encoding her message and transmitted it through channels that would route it across 17 different star systems before reaching its intended recipients. If any of her former teammates were still alive, they would receive it within 48 hours. Then she sat back in her chair and looked around her small, peaceful apartment. In a few days, she might never see this place again. The life she had built here, the classes, the quiet routine, the carefully maintained anonymity, might be over forever. But Elena Martinez had made peace with that possibility long ago. The war had taught her that survival sometimes required abandoning everything you thought you wanted in order to protect what actually mattered. And what mattered was ensuring that the beings who had died to end the hegemony war hadn't died for nothing. Elena turned off the lights and settled into the meditation position she had learned during military training. Her body remained relaxed and ready to sleep. But her mind stayed alert, automatically cataloging every sound from the building around her. Tomorrow she would discover whether the quiet student she had become could transform back into the warrior who had helped save the galaxy. She suspected the answer was yes. Elena arrived at Professor Vash's classroom 15 minutes early, positioning herself where she could observe both entrances while appearing to study. Her encrypted message from the night before had already received 3 responses, confirming her worst fears. Former members of Tactical Unit 7 were being systematically eliminated across the galaxy. The responses had been brief and coded, but Elena understood their meaning perfectly. Sergeant Rodriguez, killed in a transport accident on Centauri Prime. Lieutenant Thompson, died of sudden illness on the medical station orbiting Kepler 4042. Staff Sergeant Kim, victim of an apparent robbery that left his credits untouched but retrieved his personal belongings. All of them had been members of the team that delivered the final strike against the Crix Collective. As students filtered into the classroom, Elena noticed changes in their behavior. Marcus Chen glanced her way more frequently than usual. 2 Altarian students she didn't recognize had positioned themselves near the exits. Even Professor Vash seemed nervous, his compound eyes reflecting agitation as he prepared his lecture materials. Today we will examine the neural chemistry of memory formation, Professor Vash announced as the class settled. Particularly how traumatic experiences create lasting changes in brain structure across different species. Elena's pen froze above her notebook. The topic felt too convenient, too specifically chosen for her presence. Human memories, Professor Vash continued, are remarkably resilient. Unlike many species that can suppress or alter traumatic recollections through biological processes, humans retain vivid details of significant events for decades. This characteristic made them particularly valuable during recent conflicts. The classroom temperature seemed to drop. Several students shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the veiled reference to the war. "Professor," Marcus Chen interrupted, "are you referring to the enhanced interrogation techniques used during the hegemony campaigns?" Elena's heart rate accelerated, but her external appearance remained calm. She had learned during military training to control physiological responses that might betray her emotional state. "I'm referring," Professor Vash said carefully, "to the fact that human soldiers could retain perfect tactical memories even under extreme stress. This made them ideal for complex operations requiring precise execution over extended periods." An Altarian student raised her hand. "What kind of operations?" Professor Vash hesitated. "Deep infiltration missions, long-term intelligence gathering, precision strikes against high-value targets." Elena understood that this was no longer an academic lecture. Someone had instructed Professor Vash to probe for information about her military background. They were testing her reactions, looking for signs that she possessed knowledge about classified operations. "The most famous example," Professor Vash continued, his voice growing quieter, "involved a small human unit that successfully infiltrated the Krix Collective's primary command structure. These soldiers spent months learning to mimic Krix behavior and communication patterns. Their mission was considered impossible by most military analysts." Elena's breathing remained steady, but her mind raced through memories she had tried to suppress. The cold tunnels beneath the Krix hive cities, the weeks of preparation, learning to move like an insect, to think like a creature that valued collective survival over individual existence. The weight of the neural disruptor device she had carried deep into the heart of enemy territory. "The operation was called Torch 7, Professor Vash said, watching Elena carefully. "It resulted in the simultaneous elimination of the Krix leadership across multiple worlds, effectively ending the war in a single coordinated strike." Elena's pen snapped in her grip. The sound was barely audible, but in the suddenly silent classroom, it might as well have been a gunshot. Every eye turned toward her corner seat, where she sat with the broken writing instrument in her hand and an expression of carefully controlled neutrality on her face. "Miss Martinez," Professor Vash said softly, "are you familiar with that operation?" Elena set the broken pen aside and picked up another one. "Only what everyone knows from the historical records." "And what do those records tell us?" "That 37 human soldiers volunteered for a mission with a projected survival rate of less than 5%. They succeeded in ending the war, but the details remain classified." Marcus Chen leaned forward in his seat. "I've heard rumors that the humans didn't just eliminate the Krix leadership. Some people say they used a weapon that specifically targeted Krix neural architecture, a weapon that could kill every member of their command caste simultaneously, regardless of location." Elena's new pen began to bend under the pressure of her grip. "Rumors are often exaggerated. But if such a weapon existed," Marcus continued, "whoever deployed it would be both a hero and a war criminal, depending on your perspective. After all, the Krix leadership caste included millions of individuals, including civilians who had never participated in combat." The classroom was completely silent now. Elena could feel the weight of every gaze upon her, studying her reactions, analyzing her responses for signs of guilt or knowledge or complicity. "The Krix system of governance made no distinction between military and civilian leadership," Elena said quietly. "Every member of their command caste was genetically programmed to coordinate military operations. Eliminating them was the only way to end the war without destroying every human colony in known space." Professor Vash's compound eyes widened slightly. "You seem remarkably well informed about Krix social structure for a xenobiology student." Elena realized she had revealed too much. The detailed knowledge she had just displayed was not available in standard academic texts. It was intelligence gathered through months of infiltration and observation, intelligence that only members of Tactical Unit 7 would possess. "I wrote my undergraduate thesis on post-war reconstruction," she said carefully. "It required extensive research into the species involved in the conflict." But her explanation felt weak, even to her own ears. The damage was done. She had demonstrated knowledge that no civilian should possess, regardless of their academic interests. The lecture continued, but Elena barely heard Professor Vash's words. Her mind was focused on escape routes, defensive positions, and the growing certainty that her carefully constructed civilian identity was about to collapse entirely. When class ended, Elena remained seated while other students filed out. She needed to assess the situation before moving, to determine whether the hallways were safe or filled with beings waiting to capture her. Marcus Chen approached her desk as the classroom emptied. "Elena, can I ask you something?" She looked up at him, noting the careful way he positioned himself to block her most direct route to the door. "What do you want to know?" "Are you Captain Elena Martinez of the Terran Marine Corps?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Elena studied Marcus's face, searching for clues about his true identity and intentions. His student records indicated he was a 19-year-old military science major from Earth. But his posture, his tactical positioning, and the way his eyes automatically swept the room for threats suggested someone with far more training than any teenager should possess. "I think you have me confused with someone else," Elena said. "Maybe. But 5 years ago, a Captain Elena Martinez led the team that ended the Hegemony War. She was awarded the Solar Cross for her role in Operation Torch 7. After the war, she disappeared from military records. No discharge papers, no pension records, no forwarding address. It's like she simply ceased to exist." Elena stood slowly, her muscles coiled for action. "And why would that interest a student like yourself?" Marcus's hand moved slightly, coming to rest near what appeared to be a standard data pad, but could easily be concealing a weapon. "Because 3 months ago, my real commanding officer ordered me to locate Captain Martinez. My assignment is to determine whether she represents a security threat or a strategic asset." Elena's mind processed this information rapidly. Marcus was military intelligence, probably Terran Security Agency. His mission was surveillance and assessment, not immediate capture or elimination. That gave her options. "And what have you determined?" she asked. "That Captain Elena Martinez is the most dangerous human being currently alive," Marcus replied. "And that she's been hiding in plain sight, studying alien biology while beings across the galaxy hunt for her." Elena smiled, and for the first time since she had begun her civilian identity, the expression was entirely genuine. It was the smile of a predator recognizing another predator. "You're partially correct," she said, "but you've made one critical error in your assessment." "What's that?" Elena's hand moved faster than Marcus could track, disarming him of his concealed weapon and pressing its barrel against his throat in a single fluid motion. The entire sequence took less than 2 seconds. "I'm not hiding," she said softly. "I'm hunting." Marcus's eyes widened as he felt the weapon against his neck. But instead of fear, his expression showed something like admiration. "Hunting who?" "The same beings who have been killing my former teammates, the ones who sent you to find me, the ones who think the war ended 5 years ago when they signed peace treaties and celebrated victory." Elena stepped back, returning Marcus's weapon to him handle first. He accepted it with obvious confusion. "I don't understand," he said. "The Crix Collective wasn't the only enemy humanity faced during the war," Elena explained. "There were others, species that collaborated with the Crix, provided resources and intelligence, helped coordinate attacks against human colonies. When we ended the Crix threat, we disrupted a much larger alliance. You think they're seeking revenge? I know they are. The pattern of deaths among my unit members isn't random. Someone is systematically eliminating everyone who participated in Torch 7. They're working through a list, and eventually they'll reach me. Marcus lowered his weapon completely. So what do you plan to do? Elena's expression hardened, and for a moment, Marcus could see the warrior who had ended an interstellar war. I'm going to finish what we started 5 years ago, but this time, I'm not waiting for them to come to me. That evening, Elena sat in her apartment with Marcus Chen, who had revealed himself to be Lieutenant Colonel Michael Chen of Terran Military Intelligence. His youthful appearance was the result of genetic modifications designed to help him blend in among university students. Your mission was to determine whether I was a threat to galactic security, Elena said, reviewing the classified files Chen had shared with her. What will you report? That Captain Elena Martinez is indeed a threat, Chen replied, but not to humanity or our allies. Elena nodded, studying intelligence reports that confirmed her worst suspicions. The deaths of her former teammates were connected to a network of species that had profited from the hegemony war. Arms dealers, information brokers, mercenary organizations, and entire governments that had secretly supported the Crix while maintaining neutral public positions. They think that eliminating Torch 7 will prevent anyone from discovering their collaboration, Elena said. They believe that once we're all dead, their secret alliance dies with us. Will it work? Elena looked up from the files, and Chen saw something in her eyes that made him grateful they were on the same side. No, she said, because they've made the same mistake that cost the Crix everything. They've assumed that humans think like other species, that we prioritize individual survival over mission completion. What do you mean? Elena activated a holographic display that showed star charts covering dozens of systems. Red markers indicated the locations where her former teammates had died. Yellow markers showed the current positions of surviving Torch 7 members. Green markers identified the homeworlds of species suspected of collaborating with the Crix. Before we deployed the neural disruptor against the Crix leadership, every member of Torch 7 memorized complete intelligence files on their collaborative network. We knew that ending the war might not end the threat, so we prepared for this possibility. Chen studied the display with growing amazement. You're saying that 37 soldiers carried detailed intelligence about enemy collaborators for 5 years, waiting for this moment. We're saying that the beings hunting us have spent 5 years eliminating witnesses to their crimes. But they haven't been eliminating witnesses. They've been creating them. Elena manipulated the holographic display, showing communication routes between the marked systems. Every time they kill one of us, the survivor protocols activate. Our teammates' final messages contain detailed intelligence about their killers' identities and locations. Instead of eliminating evidence, they're providing us with proof of their collaboration. And now? Elena smiled again, and Chen understood why enemy forces across the galaxy had learned to fear that expression. Now, the quiet student disappears forever, she said, and Captain Elena Martinez goes back to war. The transformation began at 0300 hours. Elena moved through her apartment with mechanical precision, dismantling 5 years of carefully constructed civilian life. The textbooks on xenobiology went into a recycling unit. The simple furniture was tagged for donation. The photograph of her father disappeared into a secured storage container that would be collected by military intelligence within 6 hours. From beneath her bed, Elena retrieved items that belonged to a different person entirely. Combat fatigues in deep space black, designed to blend with the darkness between stars. A tactical vest with integration points for military-grade electronics. Weapons that officially didn't exist, fabricated from materials that could pass through any civilian security scan while maintaining lethal effectiveness. Lieutenant Colonel Chen watched from the kitchen doorway, as Elena assembled her equipment. "The university will ask questions when you disappear." "Elena Martinez will suffer a family emergency," she replied, checking the power cell on a device that resembled a standard communication pad but carried enough explosive force to level a small building. "She'll take an extended leave of absence. By the time anyone investigates, the records will show she transferred to another institution in a different system." "And Captain Martinez?" Elena holstered a sidearm designed specifically for use against non-human physiology. "Captain Martinez died 5 years ago when the war ended. What you're seeing now is something else entirely." Chen studied her transformed appearance. Gone was the quiet student who sat in the back of Professor Vash's classroom. In her place stood a figure that radiated controlled lethality. Someone who moved like violence was simply another language she spoke fluently. "What should I call you?" Elena activated a holographic display showing the star system where her next target waited. "The beings hunting my unit have a name for me. They call me the Finisher, the human who ended their war and destroyed their prophets. The target was Korath Prime, a world that served as headquarters for the Hegemony Reconstruction Consortium. Officially, the consortium existed to help rebuild worlds damaged during the war. In reality, it was a front for the species that had secretly supported the Crix while maintaining public neutrality. The consortium has been using reconstruction contracts to eliminate evidence of their collaboration," Elena explained as she planned her approach to Korath Prime. "They take control of former Crix territories, then systematically destroy any records that might implicate their member species in war crimes. And they're killing your teammates to prevent testimony about what you discovered during the infiltration missions?" "Exactly. But they've made a critical error. They assume that humans operate like other species, that removing key individuals will collapse the entire intelligence network." Elena manipulated the holographic display, showing the detailed structure of the consortium's leadership. 12 species, 47 member governments, thousands of individuals who had profited from human suffering during the war. "They don't understand that humans are uniquely suited for long-term revenge operations. We remember. We plan. We execute with precision that other species consider pathological." Chen watched as Elena outlined her mission parameters. She would infiltrate the consortium's central facility, extract detailed records of their collaboration with the Crix, and eliminate the leadership structure that had ordered the deaths of her teammates. "This sounds like a suicide mission," he said. Elena's smile was predatory. "That's what they said about Torch 7. The journey to Korath Prime took 18 days aboard a civilian transport ship. Elena traveled under identity documents that identified her as Dr. Sarah Williams, an agricultural specialist contracted to assess soil contamination on worlds affected by the war. Her credentials were perfect because they were real, created by military intelligence and backed by legitimate academic records. During the voyage, Elena observed her fellow passengers with the analytical mind of a soldier. The ship carried refugees returning to rebuilt homes, merchants seeking new opportunities in former war zones, and scientists like her supposed identity studying the long-term effects of the conflict. But Elena also noticed others. A Thriaxan diplomat who spent too much time studying passenger manifests. 2 Altarian traders whose cargo containers were sized for military equipment rather than commercial goods. A human businessman whose background story contained subtle inconsistencies that suggested intelligence training. They were all traveling to Korath Prime for the same reason she was. The consortium was preparing for something significant, possibly the final elimination of remaining Torch 7 members. On the 15th day of the journey, Elena received an encrypted message through channels that appeared to be routine agricultural correspondence. The message was brief. "Package delivered to intended recipient. No return address found. Recommend immediate harvest. Elena deleted the message and walked to the ship's observation deck, where she stood looking out at the stars while processing the intelligence she had just received. Another of her former teammates was dead, Staff Sergeant Patricia Valdez, killed in what appeared to be a mining accident on Kepler Station. That brought the total to 15. 15 members of Torch 7 eliminated in 6 months, their deaths made to look accidental or random. Only 22 remained alive, scattered across known space and unaware that they were being systematically hunted. Elena activated a personal communication device and composed what appeared to be a routine update to her agricultural research supervisors. But embedded within the technical language was a different message entirely: coordinates for Korath Prime and instructions for the surviving members of her unit. Torch 1 to all remaining elements. Harvest season commencing. Primary objective identified. Recommend immediate convergence on agricultural research station. Bring your preferred tools. She transmitted the message and returned to her cabin. In 3 days, she would reach Korath Prime. If her surviving teammates received and understood her communication, they would also be en route to the same destination. Elena began the final phase of her preparation. The quiet student was gone. Dr. Sarah Williams would disappear once she reached the planet's surface. What remained was the weapon that had ended an interstellar war, and the mind that had planned the most successful infiltration operation in military history. Korath Prime appeared as a blue-green sphere against the darkness of space, its surface dotted with the lights of cities that had been rebuilt after the war. The orbital approach revealed no obvious military installations, just the infrastructure of a world dedicated to peaceful reconstruction. But Elena's trained eye noticed details that civilian passengers would miss. The satellite network was too sophisticated for a simple reconstruction operation. The traffic control patterns showed gaps that suggested military vessels on classified schedules. The energy signatures from the planet's surface indicated facilities that consumed far more power than their supposed purposes would require. Elena disembarked at the primary civilian spaceport, her credentials passing inspection without question. Dr. Sarah Williams had legitimate research authorizations and a documented history of soil analysis work on former battlefield worlds. The taxi that transported her to her assigned accommodation passed through districts that showcased Korath Prime's dedication to peace and reconciliation. Memorial parks honored the dead from all species. Cultural centers promoted understanding between former enemies. Schools taught children about the importance of preventing future conflicts. Elena observed it all with the analytical mind of someone who understood how effectively propaganda could conceal darker truths. The memorial parks were positioned to hide surveillance installations. The cultural centers contained communication arrays that monitored traffic across dozens of star systems. The schools were built on sites where evidence of war crimes had been systematically destroyed. Her assigned quarters were in a residential complex designed for visiting researchers and diplomats. The apartment was comfortable and well-appointed, with all the amenities necessary for an extended stay. Elena performed a thorough security scan using equipment disguised as standard scientific instruments, confirming her suspicions that the rooms were monitored by multiple surveillance systems. She unpacked her equipment in full view of the hidden cameras, displaying the tools and materials that Dr. Sarah Williams would need for soil analysis work. But several items had dual purposes known only to someone with her training. The soil acidity tester contained a molecular assembler capable of producing military-grade explosives from common chemicals. The portable microscope doubled as a precision guidance system for remote targeting operations. The sample collection containers could be reconfigured as communication relays for coordinating with her approaching teammates. That evening, Elena attended a welcome reception for visiting researchers hosted by the consortium's local administration. She mingled with legitimate scientists while mentally cataloging the security arrangements and identifying individuals whose behavior suggested military or intelligence backgrounds. The consortium's director for Korath Prime was a Thriaxan named Vexathara, whose species had maintained strict neutrality during the war. But Elena noticed that Vexathara wore a ceremonial ring containing Crick's genetic material, a symbol of respect that only collaborators would display so openly. "Dr. Williams," Vexathara said as they were introduced, "I understand you're here to study soil contamination from battlefield weapons. Fascinating work, considering how little accurate information exists about the specific technologies deployed during the final operations." Elena accepted a drink and smiled politely. "I specialize in analyzing contamination patterns from exotic weapons systems. It's amazing what residual signatures can tell us about deployment methods and targeting protocols." Vexathara's compound eyes widened slightly. "You must have access to quite sophisticated analysis equipment to detect such subtle traces." "Military-grade scanners, actually. I'm one of the few civilian researchers authorized to use that level of technology." The conversation continued for several minutes, with Elena providing just enough technical detail to establish her expertise while carefully observing Vexathara's reactions. The Thriaxan was probing for information about her real identity and capabilities, confirming Elena's suspicions about the true purpose of the consortium. Later that evening, alone in her monitored quarters, Elena composed what appeared to be a routine research report, but embedded within the scientific language was detailed intelligence about Korath Prime's security systems, personnel roster, and facility layouts. She transmitted the report through channels that would route it to agricultural research institutions across known space, but she knew that her surviving teammates would intercept and decode the real message within hours. At 0347 hours, Elena's communication device received a response that appeared to be a routine acknowledgement from her research supervisors. The embedded message was brief but significant. Torch 7 through Torch 15 now in system, standing by for harvest coordination. 8 of her surviving teammates had received her message and traveled to Korath Prime. They were positioned throughout the system, awaiting her signal to begin the operation that would end the threat to their unit permanently. Elena lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the quiet sounds of the residential complex around her. Tomorrow, she would begin the field research that would provide cover for mapping the consortium's real operations. Within a week, she would have identified every target necessary to complete her mission. The beings who had hunted her teammates believed they were eliminating witnesses to their war crimes, but they had actually assembled the evidence that would destroy them. Every member of Torch 7 carried detailed intelligence about the consortium's collaboration with the Cricks. Every death had triggered protocols that shared that information with the survivors. Now 8 of the most dangerous soldiers in human history were positioned around a world that contained the leadership of the organization responsible for those deaths. Elena possessed detailed plans of their facilities, complete intelligence about their security measures, and intimate knowledge of their personnel and operations. The consortium had made the same mistake that cost the Cricks their empire. They had assumed that humans could be defeated through conventional tactics, that eliminating key individuals would collapse the entire threat. They had forgotten that humans were uniquely capable of conducting warfare that spanned years or decades. That human soldiers could carry grudges across star systems and pursue vengeance with methodical patience that other species considered obsessive. Elena activated her communication device one final time, transmitting a message that would reach every surviving member of Torch 7, regardless of their location in the galaxy. "The war is not over. It never ended. Tomorrow we finish what we started 5 years ago, but this time we ensure that no one will ever again profit from human suffering." She closed the device and settled into the meditation position that had sustained her through 5 years of civilian life. Her body relaxed and prepared for sleep, but her mind remained alert, automatically cataloging every sound and movement from the complex around her. In the morning, Dr. Sarah Williams would begin her soil analysis research with scientific precision and professional dedication. But underneath that identity, Captain Elena Martinez was preparing for the final battle of a war that had never truly ended. The quiet student was gone forever. The warrior who had finished one war was about to begin another. And this time, she would ensure that the victory was permanent.